Welcome to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today is a very special episode because we are celebrating our 100th podcast. We're really excited because we're going to look back at our 10 most popular episodes and we're each going to share one underappreciated favorite, so stay tuned. Your Law School Toolbox hosts are Alison Monahan, that's me, and Lee Burgess. We're here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so that you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. We're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the Catapult Career Conference. I also run the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we would love to hear from you. With that, let's get started.
Before we get started with this special episode, I wanted to take a moment to let you know a few of the ways we can support you in your law school and bar exam journey. Besides the podcast and our blogs, thelawschooltoolbox.com and barexamtoolbox.com, we offer an on-demand course to get you ready for law school called Start Law School Right, one-on-one law school tutoring, helpful bar exam courses like our Writing of the Week course, and bar exam tutoring for the UBE and California bar exams. We can support you no matter where you are on your path to becoming a lawyer. You can learn more about what we do on our websites or send us a note on our contact forms. Welcome back to today's special episode celebrating our 100th podcast episode. We're excited to look back at our 10 most popular episodes and we'll each share our unappreciated favorite. I just can't imagine, or I can't believe that we've done 100 of these, to be honest.
Yeah, it was really crazy. I was looking at them, I was like, wow, we just released like number 96. Huh, how did that happen?
I know. And I remember when we started doing this, I don't think I ever thought we would get to 100, let alone who knows how long we'll end up doing this.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we thought anything past like, oh, we've got to get these first couple of episodes up and have a few ready to go so that if we get on iTunes, they won't like penalize us.
I know, right? And we should thank all of our listeners because we are also very humbled by the amount of downloads we get each month that is way surpasses what we thought in the beginning.
Oh, yeah, like order of magnitude. So yes, really, seriously, thank everyone for listening. We hope it's been helpful. And yeah, I mean, looking over this list, I was like, wow, some of these are actually like really useful.
I know. So let's get started. Should we start with number 10 and do a kind of late night TV countdown?
Exactly. I used to listen to Casey Kasem with his top 40, so nice. You know, I'm really into this.
All right, sounds
all right,
good.
Lee, what's number 10?
Number 10 is episode 51, The Characters You'll Meet in Law School. So, Alison, why do you think this one is particularly popular?
Well, it's got a great title.
It's true, it does. It does.
And I think people are curious about this. I mean, you hear so much about the gunners, and people wonder, you know, are all my classmates going to be really weird? Like, am I going to be the only normal person there? Like, is everybody going to study a lot? Are they going to be really nerdy? Like, are they going to be able to be rich? I don't know. I mean, I guess I had all kinds of weird perceptions about what people were going to be like when I started law school.
Yeah, and I also feel like lawyers or people who are in law school or have just finished law school, if you are going to be coming into law school, they love to tell you about all these characters. You know?
Oh, yeah. Like you hear all these horror stories about like, oh, well, you know, your teachers are going to be really mean and your classmates are going to be burning books. And, you know?
I know. Or somebody told me about the person with the 27 highlighters or the people who brought in little figurines to class or to the exam room. And then the snackers. You were a snacker.
Yeah. I think I told you about the clay figurine person.
Yes, I think you did.
I like sat by at orientation or even maybe admitted students day and I was like, wow, this is like a whole other level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I've never seen anything like this in my life.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting. I mean, it's a true cast of characters and, you know, the pressure cooker of law school definitely brings out everyone's idiosyncrasies, I think.
I think for some reason law school tends to attract at least, not everyone, but maybe like 20 to 30% of the people who are there are very, very idiosyncratic.
Mm-hmm. I think that's true. And even professors can be pretty quirky. I mean, the law school environment is just a quirky place.
Yeah, it's full of a lot of nerds, basically.
Yeah, basically.
There's a lot of nerds trying to be cool so that they can pretend they're going to develop business.
Oh, good times. All right. Well, that was definitely a fun episode. It was a fun episode to record and reminisce about our law school experiences and everybody who we met. Should we move on to number 9?
Yeah, for sure. If anyone's wondering at this point, like, who am I going to meet at orientation, check out episode 51. The characters you will probably meet in law school. So the next one, number 9, definitely on the more practical side of the spectrum, an issue a lot of people are always concerned about. This is episode number 7, which is about time and life management basics.
I was really happy to see that this was on the list because as someone who mentors and coaches law students and bar exam takers, this is such a big issue. So it made me really happy that a lot of law students and prospective law students who we know also listen to the podcast are taking this stuff seriously because balancing time is a huge challenge in law school, and you kind of got to have your time management game down.
Yeah, for sure. I think that if I had to pick one thing that people really struggle with the most when they start law school, it's this. Mm-hmm. You know, everybody's smart. Everybody can do the work. Like, the work wouldn't be hard if you had 48 hours in a day and you could just like chill out, do your reading, you know, not worry about it. The reason it's hard, I mean, among other reasons, one of the key reasons it's hard is that you just don't have that much time. And if you start slacking off, you start kind of falling behind, you maybe get a little bit burned out, maybe you get sick, you know, pretty quickly you're looking at a major problem.
I think that's really true. And the nice thing about focusing on some of, maybe not the nice thing, but the practical thing about focusing on time management now in law school is that you can really find out what works for you. Because when I talk to practicing lawyers, this is still something that they struggle with, both in the workplace, because you need to rack up those billable hours if you're in a billable hour workplace, but also life only seems to get more complicated. And you're maybe balancing significant others, families, you know, taking care of elderly families, pets, friends. Maybe you want to train for a marathon. I mean, it all never seems to get simpler. Actually, it only seems to get more complicated.
I think that's right. I mean, in some ways, law school really is the easier part of your legal career in terms of time and life management. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously, it's just not, you know, being a lawyer is a very demanding job.
Right.
It is not going, you're never going to wake up and be like, wow, this is totally chill. That's just not, it's really not the way the profession is.
Yeah.
You know, there's always someone who needs your attention, someone who needs your time, whether it's your client or whether it's the person you're working for, or whether it's the judge, or whether it's opposing counsel. You know, you're always going to be juggling a lot of demands on your time, not to mention getting your actual work done. And so I think law school is a great place to really start honing those skills. Mm-hmm. And, you know, one of the things we talk about a lot, probably in this episode, definitely on the podcast and other similar episodes, is, you know, getting deep work done. And I've been reading Cal Newport's book, Deep Work.
Oh, I'm looking at it right now. It's under my podcast microphone. No joke. It's holding up the mic to remind me to read it when it's time for me to do my deep work, which I'll be honest has not happened this week.
You know, it's a really useful book. I had it on my desk for months and months and months, probably years, to be honest. My podcast mic is actually sitting on a book called Essentialism, which I also haven't, I got about 10 pages into and was like, well, I essentially get the point of that. But no, I mean, I think, you know, his point, which I think is valid, is that as we, as a society, are more and more and more distracted, having that ability to focus and really do like the serious work that needs to be done can drastically enhance your career. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the time to start on that is in law school.
Yeah, I think that that's really true. And, you know, for women listening who are going to enter into the workforce, there's been a lot of writing about the additional kind of family responsibilities, life responsibilities that women are also managing on top of professional responsibilities, and how exhausting that is. And if you see down in your future life path that you are going to have a lot of people relying on you, you need to be able to manage your time and manage the time of a lot of other people as well.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. You know, women typically end up being kind of the CEO of the household, even if they have a high-powered job. So Not to say that people just have to buy into that, but it's just something to be aware of. That you probably, if you're not going to do this, will probably need to actively resist it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So skills that we're constantly learning about, and it's probably a topic we'll continue to do podcasts on periodically, because a lot of folks out there in the universe are continuing to write on this, including Cal Newport with his deep work, to make sure that we can all efficiently get stuff done in this ever distracting world. I just had to shut off Facebook again because of political stuff that was happening today. And I just had to stop. I had to stop because I was not going to get anything done at all.
Yeah, I definitely try to limit that to certain, little snippets. But, that's a perfect example. If you're trying to read your cases as a 1L and you're getting distracted by the thought that you're going to lose your health care or whatever it is that happens to be happening that particular day, that's not really going to be an effective way to study.
No, absolutely not.
Being cognizant of that and saying, okay, what are some options? What can I do? What are some tools I can employ? That's the kind of stuff you'll find in Time and Life Management Basics, episode 7.
Great transition there. I like that.
Hey, I listened to a lot of Casey Kasem as a kid.
I'm saying that now. This is a totally new side of you.
All right, next up we have
episode 56, getting off to a smart start in law school. Well, I think one of the themes that we've seen in our top 10 countdown is a lot of interest in kind of our starting law school podcast, which I think is great.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think people who are getting ready to start law school are spending a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of money to have this experience, and hopefully they're approaching it in a reasonable way and doing their due diligence and their research. I mean, these are people who want to be lawyers. Hopefully you're doing your due diligence, but I think understanding what you're getting into is absolutely critical.
Mm-hmm. I think that that's right. And in this episode and a lot of our other episodes, kind of for this pre-law group, one of the things we're trying to do is just help warn you of some of the common pitfalls we see, well, I guess maybe common traps students fall into when they start law school. I mean, we talk to a lot of people who are unhappy with how law school is going. Unfortunately, we don't get a lot of phone calls. It's like, law school is amazing. I'm rocking it.
So we only get those from our existing students,
yeah, exactly.
Not from people looking for help.
Right. My inbox, in our bar exam programming, it's bar exam season, which means folks are getting good and bad bar exam news around the country. And I don't get very many emails unless they're from existing students saying, I was just sending you a note because I just passed the bar and I'm so happy. That's not.
Yeah, really maybe very occasionally we get one that's like, hey, I listened to all your podcasts and they helped me pass the bar. Thanks. But that's definitely less likely.
But we do love those. So if you want to send me that email, I would love to see it in my inbox. So.
Yeah, but those are pretty few and far between, unfortunately. Mostly it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know how this happened. I've taken the bar 3 times. Yeah. I keep failing.
Yeah.
Same thing in law school, we're your future if you don't if you don't understand what you're getting into and approach it in a reasonable manner and really deliberately, I think. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that's a key word here. You've got to be deliberate about this. We're not saying you have to study, 20 hours a day and kill yourself, but you have to be deliberate about what your goals are, what you're trying to achieve, and the best way to get to that.
And I think we actually say the opposite. It's important to find balance. It's important to figure out what you do need to spend your time on, because we have seen students try to study, no joke, 18 hours a day or be awake and functioning 18 hours a day and sleeping a few hours at night. And then they find themselves in a very bad emotional and physical space halfway through the semester, and they're not really sure how they're going to get to the end of the semester. That's not a place you want to be either.
No, it's not. And that can lead to physical breakdown, mental breakdown, emotional breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
It's breaking down in law school is not going to help you get good grades.
No.
Whatever you need to do to avoid that breakdown state is worth doing.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's really the point of that episode. And I think it's a good primer for those who are starting law school in the fall to listen to now. And you can always, of course, check the show notes and things for a bit of a refresher on what we talk about. But it's just good to keep in mind habits and mistakes that many of us made, including Alison and I, that we would like to save you from repeating.
I mean, nobody's perfect. But,
No.
if you can save yourself, that feeling of going into exams and really having no idea what to expect and not being at all sure that you've prepared correctly, and then you get out and you realize, wow, I really didn't know what I was getting into. Like, that's not something that we want you to do.
Exactly.
We want you to go in feeling confident that, however the ball bounces and whatever grade you end up getting, at least you understand what you're going to be asked to do and you feel like you've prepared as well as you possibly can given the time constraints. I would say that is a smart start.
Yeah, I agree. And you can learn more about that in episode 56, Getting Off to a Smart Start in Law School.
Nice transition, Lee.
Thank you.
All right.
I think it was Ryan Seacrest who was doing the countdown in LA when I was living there in like the late 90s.
Yeah, I'm talking about when I was like a small child.
I know.
When I used to roller skate around my basement while listening to Casey Kasem.
That's pretty amazing.
It was my Saturday thing.
That's awesome. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was very 80s.
I didn't know you had roller skating skills.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I had my second birthday at Skateland.
Oh, nice.
No, this was rural North Carolina. There was not a lot to do besides go roller skating.
Well, that makes sense. We had, I'm trying to remember what it was Roller Town. That was our roller rink. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Small town roller skating rinks. The place to be in the 80s.
It was totally the place to be.
Yep.
All right, well, the next one, what are we at? 10, 9, 8, 7. I was happy to see on the list, which is episode 11 on Legal Writing 101, because I think legal writing can be a little bit underappreciated in terms of people just sort of think, oh, God, it's this time-consuming thing I have to slog through. But legal writing is absolutely critical, not just for law school, but actually for being a lawyer.
Exactly. And if you can figure out legal writing, it's going to help you in your essay exams. It's going to help you with your papers later on in law school. It's going to help you with the bar. It's going to help you once you enter work. I mean, really understanding the formulaic nature of legal writing and what it means to write persuasively and objectively, and not even to mention doing legal research. These are really what people spend their time doing in law school and when they practice law. Yeah,
I mean, this basically is what lawyers do. Mm-hmm. Lawyers write.
Right. And people typically aren't thrilled with legal writing because it can be frustrating at first. It can be different. It's a bit of I don't think it's a different skill set, but how would you say that it's different from other writing you've done in the past? I mean, it's more formulaic. It's got a different cadence to it. It's got different requirements.
Right. I mean, I think it depends on what type of writing people have done in the past. I mean, if somebody's coming from a very creative writing background or something like that, legal writing, very different. Mm-hmm. I mean, I actually had been a programmer. So for me, it was almost the same sort of thing as programming, just with words instead of formulas. Mm-hmm. Because it's very, if this, then. Okay, what do we need to show? You have to break everything down. You have to lay out essentially what you need to show, and then you have to show it. And that's how you write. It's this sort of, it's almost like a ping pong back and forth sometimes of like, here's what we have to show. Okay, this side's going to argue that. This side's going to argue that. Where's the judge going to come down? What are the areas of ambiguity? What do we really need to focus on here? And then, of course, you have all the boring stuff like citations that just drive people crazy.
Yeah. I do remember my friends who had been either technical writers or done science or computer science or something like that found legal writing to be a lot closer to that style of writing, just because it was so formulaic. For those of us who came at legal writing from, I was doing political PR and consulting before law school. We've had a lot of students who are English majors and philosophy majors who can get very frustrated because it's a very different type of writing than you may have done in a lot of the kind of social sciences, even in undergrad.
Right. I mean, it's just the way you show your thinking and the way you get to a conclusion can be very different. Mm-hmm. You have to really support every single piece of thing. Everything that goes onto the paper has to be supported. I think one of the things that's difficult is no one really cares about your opinion.
Right. Or your creativity at this point. Right. That was what I learned. It was like, don't be creative.
Yeah. Like, this is how I think the case should come out. It's like, okay, that's great. Would you like to have some evidence for that?
Right.
Like, thanks for sharing. Can we get back to the main discussion now?
Yeah.
And sometimes I think, a lot of these assignments are kind of designed to push up against people's perceptions of the way things should be and make them really lay out, okay, not just like, oh, well, justice requires whatever. It's like, all right.
I also think that most people who go to law school consider themselves to be pretty good writers. And if you get some tough feedback in legal writing, it can knock you down. I know I talk about my own legal writing class in this episode, and it's humbling, and dealing with that feedback and, shifting your writing style, especially if you feel that you have gotten praise for your writing in the past, it can be very humbling and a very a pivotal moment where you can practice the growth mindset, which we might talk about in a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah, I think there could be a lot of ego involved here. And, sometimes we even work with students who think they write better than the judge, write better than their professors, write better than everyone else. And we're like, you're literally about to fail out of law school. Like, this is not even a joke.
Right.
Maybe you need to take a step back here, and you might be a great writer in other contexts, but you are clearly not doing well in the context that you have chosen to write in right now.
That's so true. So it's a challenge for almost everyone in law school at some point, and I think we had some pretty good nuggets in here to get you in the right mindset to learn from your professors and find your own voice in this legal writing framework.
Right, which you'll do over time, not necessarily on closed memo number 1.
Right. All
right, let's move along. Another super useful episode coming in at number 6 is episode 65, which is about how to make a useful law school outline. And I think the key word in this title is useful.
Yes, and it wasn't surprising to me to see this on the list because we get a ton of questions from listeners or folks who read the blog about outlines. Outlines continue to kind of befuddle law students because they just aren't sure what's supposed to be in them and what's the point.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's valid. And also, I think another issue is that that's not the only way to kind of do law school. Like, I really was not that into the traditional typed up long outline that had every piece of information in it. And so I think part of it, and I think we probably touched on this in that episode, is, thinking about what's going to work for you and how you actually learn. But the key points, the underlying idea of having an outline is this is the way you put your work together.
Right.
This is where you make sure everything makes sense to you. You put it together in a way that you can actually use on an exam. However you get to that goal matters less than the fact that you get there.
Exactly. And that everybody learns differently. You and I learn very differently. And there's a lot of pressure in law school to create this one magic study tool. And I think it comes from not only the mythology around law school, but it also comes from even movies. Like, I remember probably watching 1L or Paper Chase or something where they all sit around and they make the outlines. Of course, they were either typing them or handwriting them at that point. And, it's like everybody thinks that's what you're supposed to do. And that if you have your hands on the magic outline, that's what's going to guarantee you the grade in class. And that's just not the case.
Need. If you just get the right outline, like, you're golden. It's like, yeah, that's not really the way this works.
No, but I understand how you can get there because of the way people talk about the outlines and the way people swap outlines. I think in this episode, I tell the story of my friend who was the editor-in-chief of the Law Review when we were in law school, and he high-scored employment law because that was his interest area, and I was taking employment law, and so I was like, hey, can I have that outline?
So good.
I'm like so sad. I remember opening it up and just being like, this is worthless to me because it was in a lot of shorthand and he had formatted it in a way that clearly made sense to him, but it was very hard for me. And I realized that although he had, been the most successful student in that class, it had there was nothing in there that I could use to be successful in that class. And
the reason he was successful is because he made this amazing outline that only he could understand.
Exactly. And so, it was a good reminder to me to just, get off my own ass and make my own outline. And then I did fine in the class. So
yeah, I mean, occasionally you could borrow one. Like, I remember I had a 48-hour take home in like European Union law or something that I was totally flailing in as a 3L. and the professor was visiting from a different school, and I asked my friend at that school like if he could possibly find me like an outline from the class, and he got me like the world's most amazing outline. And I was like, it's a 48-hour take home. I have this amazing outline. I'm pretty much set. And I was. I got an A. But, you know, if it had been an in-class exam, totally different story.
For sure. And that's another point about outlining is you have to think about what sort of study tools are going to help you given the format of your exam. I think one of the things we mentioned in that episode, which we constantly try and talk to students about very early in the semester, is you need to find out the format of your exams so you know how you're going to study. You know, we request that you start outlining early in the semester, but it's very difficult to do that if you don't know whether or not it's going to be a multiple choice or a take home or an in-class, open book, closed book, partially open book, one-page sheet, you know, whatever it might be. You need to know what the end game is so you can start to prepare for it from the beginning of the semester.
Exactly. It's just like getting it off to the smart start.
Yeah.
In fact, the next podcast on the list is actually very similar to getting off to a smart start, which is episode number 60, which is our 5 tips for surviving the first month of law school. So I think this episode is going to be a little more focused on, you know, the day-to-day kind of survival as a new 1L. But, you know, it's going to have a bunch of stuff on time management, academics. Could be a good, you know, if you want to jump in and kind of get an overview.
And it's also about appreciating this transition. I think especially if you've been working and are going back to law school from, well, really, if you're going back to law school either from a workplace or from undergrad, it's a transition no matter what.
Oh, for sure. It's definitely, it's going to be a new experience.
It is. And some of it can not feel that great. You know, I think I talk about how going back to law school felt a lot like high school. I had a locker. Everybody had these big book bags. You had all, you know, these assigned seats. You were hanging out with the same people all the time because you had all these people in your same section. And that was a little disconcerting for me because, no offense to any of my high school friends that might be listening to the podcast, but I didn't really want to go back to high school. I was pretty done with it when I left. So,
yeah. And I think even if you've done a different graduate program, it can still be really different. I mean, I did a degree in architecture before. And I mean, there was literally like no overlap between the start of architecture school and the start of law school. They were completely different.
Yeah.
So I think everybody's going to have that adjustment period. And it's just a question of kind of getting through that and getting comfortable as quickly as you can.
I think that's true. It's not an easy transition, though. And I think you have to give yourself space and time to get into the groove. And if you don't feel like you're humming along where you want to be in the second or third week, on one hand, you want to give yourself a little time, but you also want to be thoughtful about the choices you're making and make sure you're setting yourself up for success.
Right. And I think, you know, particularly if you're moving, you know, you've got to think ahead of time about how much time do you need to settle in? Like, how are you don't want to be stressing over not having a place to sleep for the first 3 weeks of class. Like one of my roommates, they literally like ran out of housing. And so one day, 3 or 4 weeks into the semester, she showed up on our doorstep because they realized one of my roommates had transferred and no one was really paying attention. And, you know, literally this person shows up on the doorstep with a suitcase and was like, so I think I'm living here. I'm like, well, where have you been living for the last like month? Classes started a month ago. And she's like, well, I've been sleeping on my friends' couches.
Yeah.
That is not a good way to start law school.
Yeah. I had a friend who was sleeping in my living room for the first month, I think, of our 2L year because his new apartment wasn't going to be ready. And, you know, 2L, it's not as mission critical, but still wasn't a great way. I mean, my living room was comfortable, but, you know.
Yeah, at some point, like, you kind of need to have a place of your own to sleep and study.
Yes. So I think it's a worthwhile episode to listen to as August nears to get in the right mindset for starting off your first month of law school. Now, the next one on our list is one of my favorites that we did.
Me too.
Yes,
I love this episode.
I do too, which is episode 83, Lawyers in Action, the Airport Immigration Crisis. So I can't remember like how you and I decided to do this episode, but you and I were both captivated by what was happening with the Trump administration's travel ban #1 that came out a few months ago and caused just chaos. There's no other way to put it in the airports around the country. But we were so taken with how the lawyers played such a pivotal part in restoring some semblance of order, but also really being kind of saviors for folks who needed defending and information. It was really a moving time, I thought.
Right. I mean, yeah, exactly. The whole thing, just that all these people would show up at all these airports and all these lawyers would show up. And one of the people we talked to in that episode is a tax partner at a firm. She's like, I had, no aptitude or experience in immigration, but I just felt like I needed to go and do what I could. And I think most people who were there, that was sort of their idea, is like, look, this is not okay. What's happening is like really, really disturbing. It's impacting people's lives in a very major way. Is there anything we can do to help? And I think for a lot of people, that impulse is why they went to law school to start with. And then that kind of got lost along the way. And so I think it was really inspiring, for lawyers, but also for people who are not lawyers to say like, okay, there's a huge power imbalance here and there's something we can do to help restore that. So I think it's a great episode. We talked to a couple of people who were at the airport. One of them brought students with her. It's just really a very fascinating kind of on the ground. I think we recorded it like a few days after this started. Yeah. So like it was very like in the moment.
It was. And if you're really ever at a point where you're wondering if what you're doing in school has meaning, I think actually one of my favorite blog posts I ever wrote, which I feel is undervalued, but was when I had gone to an event and heard some pretty amazing lawyers speak. And I think the blog post was something to the effect of why the world needs lawyers. And
I think it's like why we still need good lawyers.
Yeah, something like that. And I felt the same way about this episode. If you're really feeling disillusioned and that you're wondering, what is the point of going through law school and earning this degree and having that bar card, I think when you are inspired by the way that being a lawyer can truly help you change the course of someone's life, that to me is what kind of gives me the warm and fuzzy still about this profession, and that what we do is incredibly important. And if there's one thing this political climate I think has taught us, is that lawyers are having a huge impact on the way that the country is moving or not moving. And and we need to celebrate, I think we need to celebrate how important the lawyers are, and that we all are in this club and we have a power to help.
Right. And not just lawyers, but the law itself.
True.
The rule of law
yes.
is something that, arguably is sort of under attack some days.
Yes.
So taking a step back and, getting out of the concern about understanding Paul's graph or something, and being like, okay, this is why I'm in law school. This is what I'm doing, and I can be doing something to positively impact the world, I think can be very powerful.
And if you're on a law school campus, I think during these, what some feel are tumultuous times, I think it's a great opportunity to seek out perhaps speeches, or I'm sure there are plenty of really interesting things going on law school campuses right now about the legal ramifications of what is happening. And make sure you make time to go to that kind of stuff, because although you might think, you have no time to attend a talk about constitutional rights right now, you might be so inspired that it makes it much easier to go to go study your con law outline or con law book, because you're seeing in action why it's so important to understand this law.
Right. And also you may have the opportunity to spend an hour listening to a world-renowned expert on this particular topic of executive power or whatever it is. Like, that's just an experience you should have as a person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is. And actually, I was recording a podcast episode that will come out soon, and about advocacy and oral advocacy. And I was talking about that Above the Law event that you and I went to a long time ago, where
that was a great event.
The litigators from the Proposition 8 gay marriage ban, who had been part of the oral arguments at the U.S. Supreme Court, were talking about the experience of prepping for that and the experience of being in the court. And I mean, we were just riveted. I mean, I know we're geeky, but we were just like, we were in geeky lawyer heaven.
Yeah, I mean, it's super interesting. And how many people have the opportunity to spend an hour at lunch eating pizza and listening to some amazing professor who this is what they devote their life to?
Yeah.
You should try to make time for that.
You should, absolutely. So if you are so inclined and you want a little inspiration for the power of lawyers, we do recommend you check out episode 83, Lawyers in Action, the Airport Immigration Crisis.
It's worth your time.
It is. All right. Now, next up, I think we're down to the final 4. So this is number 4 is episode 8, Law School 101 for 1Ls, What Not to Do.
Yeah, this is like what not to wear. Exactly. Like these are our top, like, you know what? Not a great idea. Trust us on this one. So if you want to avoid a total disaster, I think we may even have a post or podcast on avoiding exam disasters, but this is kind of avoiding disasters throughout the semester. Just don't do these things. Yeah. Just don't.
Yeah. Just try and skip them. Learn from those who have come before.
Yeah, sometimes you don't have to figure everything out on your own. There are actually, I'm not saying there's one perfect way to get through law school, but there are a lot of bad ways that were not going to be helpful.
Yeah, I think that is definitely true. So it's worthwhile to check out. You can always skim the show notes to see if any of those things that we cover sound like something you might be inclined to do or have done, to decide if you're going to invest your half hour. But it's a good, solid episode, worth the number of downloads it's got.
Yes, absolutely. It has earned them.
Yes.
Well, I think this next one, I think technically we're not counting because it's 000. But that is our introduction episode. So if you are interested in knowing more about me, more about Lee, more about the Law School Toolbox, how did we start? What do we do? What are our motivations? Why did we go to law school? That's like the quasi episode for you.
It is. It's a little get to know you. I think what's so interesting about the podcast medium is when you listen to podcasts, you do really feel like you get to know the podcasters.
Right.
And I've had folks who've talked to me on the phone after being listeners to the podcast, and they're like, wow, you sound just like you do on the podcast. This is so amazing. Or they'll ask me how my son is doing, or they, because
you're like, do I know you?
I know, but I mean, it's sweet actually. And I feel the same way about, people in social media or podcasters that I follow, that you do feel like you get to know them,
Yeah, we're all like, you know what? If I met Elizabeth Gilbert, I'm sure we'd be buddies. Like,
totally.
Cool. I haven't really met yet. She was actually at Esalen once when I was there, but I was like, no, I'm going to give her space. I'm not going to like invade her privacy.
Hey, if I saw Brene Brown, I would be like, I'm going to invade your space. You're amazing. I want to have coffee with you.
Yeah, I feel like she might be more receptive. I think Elizabeth Gilbert was working on her last book, and I was just like, oh, she's like in her own headspace. I don't want to bother her.
That one's also on my desk. I started it and never finished it.
Well, there's time.
There's always time. So it's an interesting episode. You can also compare our early podcasting to some of our later episodes and see if we got better.
Yeah, I'm kind of actually embarrassed about these last couple because these were literally like some of the first episodes we ever recorded. And I have to say, like, I think they could be a little stilted.
Well, it's just Alison and Lee, the early days. What can we do?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're not bad. I think they might just be a little more stilted than
might be
now.
Just a little bit. Right. But there's still some good stuff in there.
There's good quality content.
That's right. Like our second to most popular episode, which is episode 2, Why Law School is Hard. And this is one of our favorite topics to talk about, actually. We always talk about this when doing our courses or talking to new law students, because a lot of times people don't really know why it is so hard.
Yeah, exactly. They've kind of heard it's going to be this like intense experience. It's going to be so overwhelming. They're never going to sleep. They're never going to see their family. But when you take a step back, I mean, all law school really is you get graded on an exam. I mean, how hard can it be?
Right. That's true. And I think folks have trouble sometimes understanding what the end game is. And I think we do this in this episode where you talk about one of your undergraduate professor friends talking about, the difference between an undergraduate exam where they're typically just asked to explain something versus a law school exam where you get a fact pattern and you're supposed to apply law and just do a completely different activity than you've been asked to do in undergraduate. And that can be really challenging and a little shocking when you get that first practice exam and you're not sure what to do about it. I mean, I remember getting a practice exam once and getting to the bottom and going,
that's interesting.
That's interesting.
Have we covered anything that would help me answer this question?
Exactly.
Like, I thought I was reading all these cases, which I remember all of those, but now you're asking me, is there a cause of action? I'm like, against whom?
Right.
What?
Right.
Like, I'm sorry. Could you give me more information on what you're looking for here?
Yeah. Yeah. So
And the answer is no, they're not going to.
They're not going to. You have to have all that information in your head. So understanding how law school is set up and why it is often so difficult helps you figure out how to game the system to set yourself up so you can be prepared for those exams at the end and maybe not have that moment that we both had of like, wow, that's interesting. Wonder what I should say on that.
Should have checked this out earlier to see what I was going to be asked to do.
Exactly.
Whoops.
Exactly.
Yeah. So don't be that person.
Yeah.
I mean, law school is hard for specific reasons. And I think the more you understand those reasons going in, the better equipped you're going to be to deal with them.
For sure. So I'm glad that folks are listening to that episode. But I was really happy to see which episode was number 1 on the countdown.
I agree.
Yes, because this one is episode 1, Mindset, the Key to Success in Law School. And it's not
There's a reason we did this one first.
Yeah, it's a reason we did this one first, because when we talk about what you need to be successful in law school, the longer we do this work, I think you and I become more passionate about this idea that it is so much about mindset. Of course, it's about hard work and smarts and all of that kind of stuff, but mindset can really create an opportunity for success or send someone into the doldrums and prevent you from being successful.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the issue is that a lot of people who go to law school have been successful academically all of their life. They've always been told, you're so smart, you're so clever. And behind the scenes, probably they were working. They felt like they were doing decent amounts of work, but they've always been rewarded for being smart, from childhood. And then what can happen is when you encounter this more competitive environment in law school, it can be just like running into, a wall of water that just comes over you when you realize, I'm going to have to work really hard. Mm-hmm. And some people think, well, that just means I'm not smart enough to be in law school. And that's really what this episode is about, is fighting against that and finding a way to approach it really more as a problem to be solved than a binary, like I'm smart enough or not smart enough to do this.
Yeah. And the book we discuss in this podcast episode is Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, which if you have not checked it out, it's a pretty quick read, but there's a lot of good nuggets in there. It'd be a good summer read. If you have some sort of summer vacation coming up, but we highly recommend it as a good use of your time.
Absolutely. I think it's worth it for everyone, because you are going to probably be challenged in ways that you haven't necessarily been challenged. And the way that you react to that is going to determine your results.
Yep, absolutely. So check out episode 1, which is at the top of our countdown, fittingly, Mindset, the Key to Success in Law School. So that was a pretty good list. We covered a variety of topics, actually, in our most popular episodes.
Yeah, we did. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll link to a page that has literally every episode we've ever done in case you want to browse and see what you could be missing. Well, before we wrap up, let's each give our listeners our favorite underrepresented episode. I think it's kind of ironic because we both actually chose the same one. But
I found another one.
You changed your selection after you read mine.
I did. Yeah, so Alison, why don't you tell, I guess it's one of our favorite episodes.
And I think this episode is truly underappreciated. We occasionally get an email from someone who's like, I listened to this episode. It's the best thing I've ever heard on taking an exam. I hope other people don't listen to it because I don't want to compete with them. But we're about to reveal the secret. If you listen to one podcast and you want to understand law school exam taking, make it number 22, which is Lee and Alison actually take a law school exam. So we literally go through in the episode how we would approach an exam question. We give you the question, and we really try to break it down. And I think, if you're wondering what an exam is like and how you should be thinking through it, mm-hmm. I think that episode is absolutely a must listen. And I'm telling you, it's not that popular. So most people are probably not going to be hearing it.
Yeah. And you get to listen to us kind of discuss our thought processes too, which are very different now, I think, when it comes to exam taking even than it was early on. When we were in law school, I guess is when early on would be, but we understand this process so much more now because we have taught law school classes. We work with law professors. We've tutored all these students. I mean, you get the benefit of a lot of that knowledge as you listen to us walk through an exam together.
Right. And sometimes I've always found it interesting that even though we learn differently and we might do a paper outline that looks really different. If you look at them carefully, they tend to have basically the same information in them, which tells you something about what's important from someone who really understands this process. And, I think that can be useful for people to say, well, they wrote this down really differently, but they got to the same end point. Okay, that's the end point I need to reach, however I get there.
Right. I think it's such a high quality episode, and we hope that this will boost its numbers.
If we do say so ourselves, yes. It's a very high quality episode.
It is a very high quality episode, and we hope it will boost its numbers and maybe make it on to the next, I don't know, maybe at 200 episodes, we'll do a top 20 or something like that. We'll see.
Make us proud. Listen to that episode.
Exactly. So my other favorite episode, other than the taking a law school exam episode, is episode 72, Seeking Accommodations in Law School and on the Bar Exam, with Dr. Jared Malouf, I think. And I think this is a really underappreciated episode because students really struggle with this idea of accommodations. And one of the things that I think is really helpful about listening to this episode is this guest who is a psychiatrist who helps do the evaluations for law school accommodations. He helps people get accommodations for the California bar at law schools around the country. He speaks about accommodations and why it is something that you should really be taking advantage of if necessary, and why that's okay. And I think there's a huge stigma around accommodations. I talk to so many students who I believe would qualify for accommodations, but they are so hesitant to get them either for the bar exam or law school. And I find that kind of heartbreaking, because if you need these accommodations, they are there to level the playing field for you and give you an opportunity for success. And it's not to say that you can't do it without the accommodations, but
why?
But why? The accommodations are there to level the playing field. And since you're competing against your peers in law school, that's really important. And no one really cares if you took the exam in a room by yourself, or if you took the exam with a little extra time, or you needed water on the table, or you needed extra restroom breaks because of a medical condition you have. I mean, there are so many different types of accommodations that really change folks' exam taking or bar exam experiences that can really change the game and showcase how well you know the material. I think what's so heartbreaking for me is when I know a student knows the material really well but can't perform on the exam because of these artificial constructs, and that their individual needs, it really works against them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people, sort of intake calls for tutoring, and just talking to them, I'm like, so, have you ever been tested for anything? Like, oh yeah, I was tested for this, that, and the other, but I haven't really asked for accommodations. And it's just like, okay, well, you need, I would totally up to you, but I would really recommend that you do that, because I think it's going to drastically improve your experience, going to improve your grades, and just generally make things more fair.
Absolutely. And I think the other big mistake people often make is they wait too long. So they wait until they've had a bad semester in law school to go ask for accommodations, or they wait
a bad year,
or they wait until they failed the bar at least once, or they wait until they're struggling, really struggling, and then towards the end of the semester when they can't get through their practice exams, they're trying to hurriedly get these accommodations. And unfortunately, there's a bureaucratic process linked to getting accommodations both at the school level and the bar level. And so you don't want to turn it into a fire drill. That is not the way to deal with it. And if this is something that you're considering learning more about or applying for, try and get to it early so you can reap the benefits of having made your way through the bureaucracy and not have it add stress to you. I mean, there's nothing more stressful than a student telling me it's a week or two before a law school exam or the bar exam, and they don't know the conditions in which they're going to be taking the test.
Yeah, that's not the position you want to be in.
So I think it's a really thoughtful episode. I think he was a great guest. And if this is something that you struggle with, I encourage you to listen to this. Or if you have friends that struggle with accommodations, I also found the language he uses around accommodations to just be really thoughtful and kind. And it's even helped me as I continue to talk to more and more students who have to deal with accommodations at the law school and the bar level. So I think it's great. I think folks should listen to it.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you for listening. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I hope you enjoyed our top 12, 13 episodes, as it turns out.
Well, we really aren't good at counting, apparently. So
we're in law school. Never mind. I went to high school for science and math. I forgot arithmetic when I learned calculus.
Yeah, exactly. All my math major friends tell me that like math stops being about numbers at a certain point. So
Yeah, it's all conceptual.
Exactly.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. If you enjoyed this episode, we would appreciate it if you took a second to leave a review or rating, because we would really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next 100 episodes. We usually release on Mondays.
And don't forget to reach out to us at lawschooltoolbox.com or barexamtoolbox.com if you are interested in our helpful courses or one-on-one law school or bar exam tutoring. We're here to support you every step of the way, and we look forward to hearing from you.
If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to Lee or Alison at lee@lawschooltoolbox.com or alison@lawschooltoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.